Kero Kero Bonito is a UK London-based pop band who broke out in 2016 with the album Bonito Generation. Bonito Generation was a very sugary and albeit quite fun album to listen to. It was very simplistic, but at the same time it had a really nice endearing charm to it. Also quite childlike at times, but yeah, I really couldn't shake off how catchy the whole thing was. And it just ended up being a really fun listen overall, and it caught on to a lot of people too. I mean, Bonito Generation is still an album that people regard to be really good. Dare I say it was a bit of a guilty pleasure album for me though. I know people don't like using that when you talk about music, but I think Bonito Generation was the guilty pleasure album of all albums. I don't usually describe it for any other pop music, but it was just so stripped down of any sort of like innovation. It was just pop, like straight pop, very basic melodies, but it was just so fun to listen to. I couldn't deny it. They did come back this year, actually very early on in the year. It was about February time, I think it was, with the Totep EP. Now Only Acting was on that EP, and it's also made its way onto the album. I'm not really sure why they've done that. That seems a bit of a strange sort of idea to do for me. I think once you've kind of like got your EP out, you don't really need to use tracks from that to make it onto your album. That feels a bit odd to me, to be honest. I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as like last year when Vic Mensa put out that EP, then about 4 or 5 months later he put out the album and every track from the EP was on the album. It just felt so pointless. But I still think once you've got the EP out, you know, you don't really need to use tracks from the EP to make it onto your album. Like, it just feels like it was sort of being put there to fill space for me. This would have been better to make more fresh material, and the new fresh material that's on this album overall is pretty decent. I don't think it's like grabbing me in that sort of endearing way, in the same way that Bonito Generation did. Bonito Generation just had that charm, that instant charm that I couldn't shake away, whereas this album doesn't really have that same appeal to me, and instead it's just pretty much like indie pop tracks, and that's fine. They've gone in a different direction, I can't deny that or take that away from them, but it just doesn't really hit me in the same way, you know? That cuteness of making tracks about bouncing up and down on a trampoline has been replaced by just very, I don't know, kind of run-of-the-mill indie pop songs. Like, there's not really much on this album that I can safely say like really gets me in that way, aside from a couple of tracks that I will praise for being really good. Time Today is actually quite a washed out, summery type track actually. It's just a really nice, catchy indie pop track with a great melody. They've got a great knack for a good melody, KKB, absolutely. I can't shake that away from them, even on tracks like Swimming as well. These to me are just like great, catchy, instantaneous tracks that even if you weren't bothering reading into the lyrics, you can still enjoy for the sake of it. You know, there's not really too much to take away lyrically, I don't think, throughout this whole album. I mean, not from what I've read anyway, to be honest. And even tracks like Sometimes, which, yeah, I'm just not really a fan of this one. I mean, you know, reading into the lyrics, it's so cliche, like sometimes you get the blues and stuff like that all over this track. It's just played over this really, like, just bland as fuck folk instrumental. Like, seriously, I'm pretty sure you can just walk past a town centre and see someone playing this type of folky tune just every day. And although they've not like been the most creative band out there, they've certainly had a pretty refreshing sound when it comes to pop music in the modern day. You could compare it to artists in the PC music camp for sure, but still, generally, there aren't many pop acts that sound like this. But when you listen to a song like Sometimes, it could just be anyone that, you know, pulls out an acoustic guitar and just plays some really simple chords. It's like a friggin' Frank Turner left over, to be honest. It's like Make Believe, though, are like just pretty much classic KKB songs at this point. Like, it just has such a great earwormy melody. I really like the drum pattern on this track too. To be honest, most of this album follows a pretty similar formula in each track, and I think it's just one of those cases where if you really dig the sound, if you're really like all for this really catchy pop type stuff, then you're gonna dig the entire album. But for me, it's just one of those cases where it just blows by. It's a really nice listen. Only, you know, like tracks like Sometimes really stick out, like in a bad way. Even the closing track I don't think really does a great job of closing out the album. It's just one of those tracks that's like a really strange distortion of like different sounds coming together. I don't really know if it's one of those things where they're like, okay, this is how the album's ending and in the future we're going to do more of this, but I don't really know if that's the case. It felt really random to end the album out this way, to be honest. And yeah, throughout the album there's not really much to complain about, but there's also not really that much substance. It's just like a sugar rush every so often, and you're kind of over it once it's done, and it's not really anything bad. It tastes fine, but it's just kind of done. So with that in mind, it is a 6 out of 10 from me. A pretty solid album, some pretty low points for KKB I think in tracks like Sometimes and the closing track, but other than that, it's solid. It's nice pop music. I can't really deny most of it. It's good. But let me know your thoughts if you're in love with this, if you don't particularly like it, if you're in the middle somewhere like me, pretty but solid for what it is, then let me know. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Have a good day. Have a good day.